All right, welcome to Cajun Connection, and it opens up with an awesome note. LSU winning the national title after an epic season in 2019, defeating the Clemson Tigers in the Superdome, Mercedes-Benz Superdome, 42-25. What do you think, Joshy?
I am completely ecstatic. I'm excited. And I just want to say, I want to start by saying this. I want to say it was maybe a season or two ago, Greg McElroy, because I sometimes watch SEC Network, Greg McElroy, Marcus Spears, Tim Tebow, and the crew. Greg McElroy said at one point, LSU never truly recovered from their 2011 loss to Alabama. We're not going to revisit that. And just every year since that, Alabama has always beaten LSU. And there was this season there was a doubts that LSU would be able to play in the SEC West. There were doubts that LSU would beat Alabama. LSU, they were able to go on the road and beat Texas. That was the first sign that this was a team that can win it all. Then they end up beating Florida at home. They end up beating Auburn. They end up beating Alabama for the first time in 8 years. Then they went up against one of the top defenses in the country, against Georgia. They beat Georgia in blowout fashion. Okay, they're going against Oklahoma. They hang 63, and they beat them by 35. And they went up against a very talented Clemson team and completely stole the show. So I have to say, last night was history. Because, yes, they did go 15-0, and they won a national title. Clemson did it last year. But the resume. LSU defeated 7 teams in the top 10 out of the 15 teams they defeated. Out of the 7 teams, 4 of them came in the top 5. I don't think we're ever going to see a season like that. The chances of us seeing a season like that are slim to none.
Yeah, it was a pretty historic season, to say the least. Okay, so this segment, we're going to talk about the game just a little briefly. After that, in segment 2, we're going to break down the individual achievements, especially Joe Burrow in his absolute record-setting season where he obliterated the books.
And obliterated secondaries.
Segment 3, we're going to talk about LSU's recruiting, and then we're going to move on to our interview with Bob Rose of Canal Street Chronicles and Sports Illustrated. And then finally, in our final segment, we'll wrap up the program by talking a little bit about the NFL playoffs and things going forward. All right. So, last night, LSU got off to a pretty slow start. Now, this does fall on Brett Venables and his ability to come up with a defensive package that can really confuse most players. Even Joe Burrow himself said all night long he had no idea where the Clemson was going to be blitzing from. So, and it definitely forced LSU to punt more than most teams have this year. And they definitely slowed down and confused the LSU offense early on in the first quarter. It took a little more than half a quarter for LSU to find the end zone, I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, and Coach Venables, he proved why he was one. He's always been one of the top assistants in the country, why he's one of the top 5 defensive geniuses in the country. But, I mean, Coach Brady and Coach Esminger, hats off to them. They figured out a way to get LSU into the end zone. They figured out, a way to really structure their offensive game plan around what Coach Venables was doing with that Clemson defense last night.
Yeah, without a question. They had LSU backed up against the wall pretty early on. I want to say their first, I know at least their first 2, and I want to say their first 3 drives all started with inside the 10-yard line. That was actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, playing the field position battle, Dabo Swinney really played his cards right. Because we never really, before last night's game, we never really seen Joe Burrow have to try and dance from, when he's back within his own 10-yard line, within his own 5. And so Dabo Swinney, he really made scoring tough for LSU. He had the mindset, if you want to score on us, how about you go a good 90-something yards? Do it. And so hats off to Coach Swinney about it. And, I mean, that's why he's one hell of a coach. And this is one of the reasons why Clemson is one hell of a team.
Right. Now, I also want to say, at first, for the first half, really, or most of the first half, it looked like Clemson could actually come and win this game. They did get out to a 17-7 lead, but that, I want to say, is the biggest their lead would be. LSU would close that gap in the second half, or no, excuse me, second quarter, and would actually go into halftime leading
28-17.
28-17.
See, we're going against LSU. I mean, you can stand toe-to-toe with those guys, and you can make it look like, oh, this is going to be a close game. We could probably pull out the victory. But what LSU has proven, and I'm just going to go back to the Florida game. Can you stand toe-to-toe with the LSU Tigers for a full 60 minutes? And there was only maybe one or two teams out of the 15 teams they defeated that was able to do that, which was Auburn and Alabama.
You know, and coming into the game, they talked about Clemson's defense being number one against the score, allowing 11.5 points per game. But, you know, that's really hard to gauge because they played in the ACC. The ACC was really bad this year, or at the very least, really mediocre. And their only real test of the season was Ohio State, who I was not too impressed with against quality teams. They struggled to really put away Penn State.
They struggled to put away Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game.
Yeah,
you know, that's why I had my skepticism about Ohio State going into the 14 playoff. And I mean, rightfully so, Clemson was a favorite to win that game.
Mm-hmm. But LSU came in. They put up 42 points on Clemson's defense.
628 yards of total offense.
LSU didn't dominate this game, even though the score was suggested they did. As we stated, they really struggled in the first half of the first half. Clemson did look like they very well could slow down LSU's offense and come and win that game. But, you know, the Tigers did ultimately end up putting up over 600 yards total offense on them. Joe Burrow passed for 463, and he had 5 pass touchdowns and 1 rushing. Once again, showing why he was the Heisman winner and reinforcing the fact that he is a strong candidate to be that number 1 overall pick come April.
And one thing I liked about Joe Burrow is his athletic ability, being able to, you know, move his team up and down the field, but his running ability, being able to extend the play, being able to take care of the ball and make the right decisions. And that's something that Joe Burrow, I mean, he was able to do that in his first season with LSU, being able to take care of the ball and manage the game, but he did a much better job of it. And I feel that with Joe Brady coming in to complement Steve Ensminger, that skill of Joe Burrow's skill set was able to be honed in on. And so I do believe Joe Burrow will be the number 1 pick going to Cincinnati, which I do believe that this can be somewhat a repeat of a LeBron James story.
I do want to, bring up LSU's defense, which clearly had improved greatly from where they were. The last real game where LSU's defense kind of crumbled in the second half was against Ole Miss, who ran all over that defense, but they still had a little bit of trouble with Etienne. Lawrence rushed for 49 yards. Etienne had 78. That puts obviously Clemson over 100 against the Tigers defense.
I mean, Etienne, he did ball out in the first half. He did run the ball very well in the first half. But I did notice how the Tigers were able to crack down on Travis Etienne in the second half.
They did. They were able to wrap him up a little bit more. Lawrence still threw for 234 yards, but was held without a pass touchdown. All of Clemson's scores came on the ground. But LSU's receiving corps, after they got into a rhythm, just absolutely destroyed Clemson in the second half. Jamar Chase had 9 catches for 221 yards and 2 touchdowns, an average of 24.6 per catch, with a long of 56. That was LSU's first score of the game. Jefferson had 9 receptions as well for 106 yards, a long of 35, an average of 11.8. But to me, the one that stood out the most was Thaddeus Moss, who came up in some key situations on third down and in the red zone, having 5 catches for 36 yards and 2 touchdowns.
I mean, Thad Moss, he just continues to impress me. He kind of started off slow on the beginning of the season, but he has constantly proved throughout the later parts of the season that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. For those who may not know, for those who's probably been sleeping under a rock, Thaddeus Moss is the son of NFL great Randy Moss. And Randy Moss had a complete dad moment of how proud he was of his son last night watching from the stands.
I think for the defensive side, let's see the linebacker core really had a strong showing last night. Patrick Queen having 8 tackles, Jacob Phillips having 8 tackles, and Jacoby Stevens coming up with seven tackles himself. Stevens is a safety, but he played a lot in the run game as well.
And Patrick Queen also winning defensive MVP last night in the game. And I believe that this game was Patrick Queen's coming out party. And I mean, I believe he is coming back next season. So definitely look for the defense to not really miss a beat, especially, recruiting, which was something we're going to get into later on.
Okay, so segment 1, that officially ends segment 1. We'll come back for our next segment where we will break down the record-breaking season by Joe Burrow and this Tiger offense. Because let's face it, that's really what stood out this season more than anything. The defense kind of lagged behind a lot.
But, consistency reigns supreme.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, welcome back to Cajun Connection. We will now break down this record-breaking season where Joe Burrow especially just obliterated the record books for LSU. And it's, in a lot of cases, it's not even close.
Good God.
So let's start out. Joe Burrow ultimately set the single-season passing record for LSU. Fell just short of the national record, but that was 5,671 yards. Officially, second place is Rohan Davey with 3,347.
Oh, God. That's a 2,000-yard difference.
Yeah. This is like I said, Burrow absolutely obliterated the record books. So next up would be his pass touchdown record, which for a season, which did end up breaking Colt Brennan's record of a single season record for most pass touchdowns in a season. That was 55. Joe Burrow finished with 60 touchdowns on the year.
Well, I thought Colt Brennan's record was 58 because Joe Burrow finished.
It was 50.
58.
I'm sorry.
And
it was
Joe,
58.
Joe Burrow finished with 60 after the game
60.
last night.
But in comparison to the LSU school record, it was Matt Mock and Jamarcus Russell who shared the record with 28. So yeah, that's what. What's the difference there?
You're looking about 32.
Yeah, 32 touchdowns more. Okay, single game touchdown pass record.
It was held by Zach Mettenberg, I believe, right?
Who had 5. He had 5. Originally, Joe Burrow broke that record against Vanderbilt with 6.
And he broke that record against Oklahoma in only the first half with 7.
It's just the first half. That's so ridiculous. That game was absolutely ridiculous. But okay, so where are we? Oh yeah, career pass touchdowns. He passed up Tommy Hodson, who had 69 total career touchdowns in 4 seasons. I mean, you got to remember, Joe Burrow is setting these records having played 2 seasons, and the other guys played 3 to 4. So these numbers are just astronomically ridiculous for the most part. But Hodson had 69. Now, I wanted to sit here and say we went into the SEC title game with Joe Burrow being, I want to say, 12 touchdowns behind Hodson for the career record. And I just thought, no way. 2 games, at best, 2-3 games left in the season. Not going to happen, right?
Yeah, about that.
So, like I said, Hodson had 69. Burrow finished with 76 touchdowns for through the air in 2 seasons.
Wow. Just wow.
Yeah, I know. Okay, single season total offense. Joe Burrow had finished the season with 5,982 yards total offense. Who do you think was second on the list?
Who do I think was second on the list?
Mm-hmm.
I want to say maybe Rohan Davey.
Yes, Rohan Davey in 2001 had 3,351 yards total offense.
All right, I just want to say about Joe Burrow, after that Texans game, at that 3rd and 17, whoever LSU hires to build statues, they should have just been like, they should have just started coming up with a blueprint. All right, so here's how we're going to do this. There should be a statue built right now.
Let's continue. We're not quite done yet.
Also, I just want to put a record out there that this LSU offense as a whole set an SEC record. They are the first offense in the history of the conference with a 4,000-yard passer, a 1,000-yard rusher, and 2 1,000-yard receivers.
Mm-hmm.
The greatest offense in the history of the SEC, and probably the greatest offense in the history of all of college football.
Yeah, they were just truly too explosive to lose this year.
But I know you're still going down records. I know you're not even close to finish. But I just want to say, just think about it. This is an LSU team that will usually run the ball, 50, 60 times a game, run heavy, pass game will always mediocre, an offense that can never really find its legs during the game. I remember the dark days of Brandon Harris, the dark days of Jordan Jefferson, the dark days of Jared Lee, Mr. Pick Six. But just think about it. This year's LSU offense is probably the greatest offense in the history of college football. Just think about it. Think about that. Let that process in your head.
For those who are wondering, LSU finished the season right around 51-49 as far as pass rush balance goes.
And they were still able to get their run game incorporated, even though they brought in a passing game coordinator and they focus heavily on the passing attack.
Right. All right, so we have total touchdowns in a game. Well, that was Oklahoma. 8, the previous. Multiple players had 5. In the Burrow's 8 touchdowns in the semifinal was also a playoff in bowl. I want to say bowl record.
I think I was told a college football playoff record, but I think it's
college football in BCS.
I mean, it's the most in a game by a single player in the BCS in the playoff era.
Mm-hmm. All right, total touchdowns in the season, so rushing and passing. Matt Mock and Russell also originally shared this one with 29. Joe Burrow finished with 65.
Jesus.
In a single season. Career touchdowns. Tommy Hodson had 71 in 4 seasons. In 2 seasons, Joe Burrow accumulated 88. We're almost done. Joe Burrow's...
keep going. If you keep going, I might have a heart attack.
I don't think they officially updated this to a final. I mean, this may be the final, but I think Joe Burrow finished with 76.3 completion percentage. If that does include last night, then Colt McCoy had 74% completions in 2008. Joe Burrow earlier in the year set a record with 17 straight completions, and his 406 completions on the season is also a school record.
Joe Burrow, the greatest player in the history of LSU football. I'm just going to say it right now.
And to me, it's not surprising. Well, we didn't know this, but in his junior year at Athens High, He and his team set the state record for most points scored in a season, and that number was 860 points in 1 year.
And this offense this year set a record for most points scored in the season.
I know, but just think about that: 860 points in a season. This is high school.
And so you're playing what? You're only like, all right. So if you want to include playoffs and state title, how many games are usually in a season for high school? Yeah, I know you have 10 in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to say you have, I think like the quarterfinals. Well, I think you have like a first round game, quarterfinal, semifinal, and the final. So you're looking about an extra 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
This is 4.
So 14 games. That's still fair. But still, 860 points in 14 games. That's pretty impressive.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. And I will give you credit for this. You did call the national championship run right after the Georgia Southern game, so I'll give you credit for that. But at the same time, I was calling Joe Burrow for Heisman after the Texas game. And,
I was starting to feel that way, but I did want to see more. Since it was only after the second game of the year, and I did want to see more out of Burrow, and I did like how Burrow stayed consistent game in and game out. I could not recall when Joe Burrow had a bad game, not even the Auburn game, because Joe Burrow was able to manage the game, though he was able to put up 400 or 500 yards passing and put up 5 or 6 passing touchdowns. He did go back to the basics of what he was good at, which is managing the game. And I did like also the play calling from the coaching staff and how they were able to get the rushing attack involved and be able to wear Auburn down and finish Auburn off in such a close battle. And I mean, that's a game I go back to because that was a game to where LSU was really battle tested. And last night they put more doubters to rest because a question that a lot of people put out about LSU is how will they be able to perform if they have to play from behind? And LSU showed they were down by 10 at one point in the game, 17-7, and LSU finished that game on 35-8 scoring run. And so LSU, so like Joe Burrow said last night in an interview, we were down by 10 and we didn't flinch.
Yeah, this was a very poised team. Burrow was not the only one to set records this year. Obviously, he broke the most records and stood out the most. Heisman winner, which we'll go over his Heisman, what I was thinking is his top Heisman moments in a bit. But let's see. I know Jamar Chase, I want to say, finished with I think like 104 receptions, so that's a school record.
Also, I do want to say to those who oppose LSU, I just want to say Jamar Chase is coming back next season.
Yeah, so is Terrence Marshall. Jordan Jefferson is likely gone. I don't see him sticking around.
You mean Justin? I don't want to. Please don't remind me of Jordan Jefferson.
So yes, Justin Jefferson. So going into this game, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson were tied for 18, which is a school record in and of itself as far as receiving touchdowns go. Dwayne Bowel, I think, had 14 or 15 in 06, which that in and of itself is an accomplishment. But ultimately, it was Chase who caught 2 scores. Jefferson was kept out of the end zone, which means Chase finished with the school record of 20 on the season.
That was Jamar Chase. He dominated over A.J. Terrell last night. And what I like about Joe Burrow, I'm just going to go back to what Joe Burrow, because it goes hand in hand. Joe Burrow found the mismatches and completely exploited it. And we learned last night, if you're an opposing defense, it is a horrible idea to put single coverage on either Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. It's a bad idea because A.J. Terrell he got cooked last night by Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
Mm-hmm. And, Burrow had a lot of Heisman moments, but I think most people agree that a handful or 3 really stood out. One, of course, was 3-17 against Texas when he ended up hitting Justin Jefferson for what ended up being the game-winning touchdown.
The way, like, also like his Heisman moments, I would say the way he evaded pressure against Georgia.
Yeah.
What was going to be a sack turned into a huge gain to Justin
Twice.
Jefferson.
2 sacks.
And his ability to evade pressure last night. I mean, when they were in the back of the end zone, he avoided a sack and was able to get a big gain to Thaddeus Moss, though it got called back because of the receiver downfield.
He already won the Heisman by that point, obviously.
And also, I just want to bring up the final moments in the Alabama game, that quarterback draw on how he was able to get that first down and put the nail in the
fourth
coffin.
down run, 16-yard run on 4th down against Alabama to keep the clock running and extend that drive. Yeah. I would say that would be his 3 biggest Heisman moments. Putting up 6 touchdowns on Vanderbilt is not that eye-popping. I mean, it's Vanderbilt.
It's Vandy.
You know, his performance against Oklahoma just reinforced the reasons why he won the Heisman, and his performance last night was also a reinforcement of why he won the Heisman Trophy. It will likely be the number 1 pick in the draft.
He's going to be the number 1 pick. Cincinnati needs a quarterback. Andy Dalton's just about done.
The fact they benched him over the season tells me that he is done.
And not only that, I mean, come on, like, he's a hometown kid. He could be a hometown hero. And like I said, this can probably be somewhat of a repeat of a LeBron James story.
Yeah. Alrighty. So, that is into this segment, and we will come back in a little bit and talk just a little bit more, just kind of like the background, the history behind LSU and the championship game, and talk about Coach O a little bit. He actually has a very storied history himself and has learned from a lot of people. So we'll be back with our third and as far as LSU go, now, well, I forget. We still have to talk recruiting. So we got about 2 more segments with that. All right, welcome back to Cajun Connection, segment 3, where we talk a little bit about the history of the title game in LSU. I found some interesting facts coming into this game. This was LSU's 6th appearance in the championship game officially. Even though the championship game, as we know it, is relatively new, the Associated Press used to name a championship prior to this. But LSU's first one was actually against, it was in 1931, and it was against TCU. This was the first year that the Associated Press officially named the national title, and it was number 1 LSU versus number 4 TCU, which TCU came on top of that one 3-2.
So you sure that wasn't like the baseball championship?
No, that was football. That was the gridiron.
So no offense at all, just plain smash mouth defense.
Yeah, that's basically what happened there. The next time LSU was in the championship game, that was that's where we really start to get familiar with them. That was 1958, 59 officially, where they faced Clemson, ironic, for their first title, and Billy Cannon threw a halfback pass for a touchdown, which ended up being the only points of the game, in a 7-0 win that gave LSU its first official championship.
So, last night was pretty much a good little national title rematch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I find ironic that in 2003, they faced Oklahoma for the national title, won 21-14 in the Dome. 2007, they faced Ohio State for the national title, won 38-24 in the Superdome. What's crazy is that Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma were all in the 4-team playoff.
That's what I was going to get into next, was the fact that all 3 of LSU's first titles came against the other 3 teams that made the playoffs this year. That was just kind of weird.
It was as if like this year was destined for LSU to win it all. And I was saying it because once I found out the national title game was going to be played in the Dome, I had already called it. LSU's going to the national title game, and they're going to win it all.
Yeah, and that's another thing is that LSU's national championship appearances have all taken place in the Sugar Bowl. TCU, a game against Clemson in 59. The 2003 championship game against Oklahoma in the
The '07
Yeah,
against Ohio State.
Against Ohio State.
Including 2011, where the curse started against.
Yeah. And a championship loss to Alabama in officially January 2012. Those were all Sugar Bowls. And last night was also in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. And so yeah, that too was also just kind of interesting. Just like okay, so when is the next national championship game in the Superdome going to be?
It's going to be a while, but I mean, look at how good this LSU team is. I mean, don't be surprised if we see maybe a dynasty. Just the ability to reload.
Yeah, and what was it? Was it Terrence Marshall last night who said, you like the season, wait till we come back next year? I forget who that was. But, yeah.
I know that one of the semifinals, the Superdome is hosting a semifinal game next season.
Okay. This was one of these things that I made a comparison was LSU's last championship prior to this was 2007. And a lot of people then said that Les Miles won that game with a lot of Nick Saban's players, or with Nick Saban's players. And, he did. But originally I had asked the question, okay, what's the difference between this and that? Because, Coach O did have a number of players that were on that 16 team that was Les Miles last year at LSU. Even though he did coach only the first 4 games of the season, they fired him after that. Why weren't people saying that about Coach O? And then I went back and I looked at the roster, and this really is Coach O's team. It really is. Yeah, there's some players that are left over from the Les Miles era, and including some of the recruits. I want to say half the recruiting class from 16 or officially 17 were Miles recruits, including was perceived to be the backup, or perceived to be initially the starting quarterback for next year, and Miles Brennan.
But I mean, so a lot of those players that were on during the Miles era, I mean, around the time Miles got fired, were freshmen. I mean, we really didn't really see them on the field. So it's really Coach O that really developed these guys into the well-oiled machine that they are. And then, of course, you add Coach O's players and the guys that were recruited during, when Coach O became the head coach. So this is mainly a Coach Orgeron, coach team. And you look at the coaching staff, one of the only guys that's still on that coaching staff from the Miles era is Coach Aranda.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Insminger and then Coach Brady, they were brought on by Coach O. So this is definitely a Coach O team. So you really can't say, oh, Coach O won with Les Miles' team. This is a Coach O squad.
Yeah. So, yeah, Coach O has a very storied history himself. A lot of, I won't say a lot of people, but a noticeable number of people actually did not originally like the hire by LSU of Coach O. He was really considered by many to be LSU settling for Coach O. As I know that Jimbo Fisher was highly targeted, even though one of the things that Joe Olivia did say about why he didn't fire Miles following the 2015 season was because he knew he would have to hire Jimbo Fisher, and he really did not want to hire Jimbo Fisher. The other one that LSU went after was Tom Herman, who ended up going to Texas, and we've seen how that turned out.
We're seeing how that's turning out right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be honest, I had my skepticism about Coach O being hired as a full-time head coach, considering his coaching history and considering the last time he was an SEC head coach. I mean, he had an abysmal tenure with Ole Miss, I think going 10-25 in 3 seasons. And so I was very skeptical about Coach O, but at the same time, you want to look at some of the positive. You want to look at the job that he's done with the New Orleans Saints. You want to look at his stint with USC, when after Lane Kiffin got fired, he was interim head coach, and how the student body called for him to be hired full time, and the job he's done at interim head coach. But I was like, Coach O, he's going to win some games. LSU's going to have some success, but I don't think LSU's going to ever get over that hump And here we are, here in January 2020, and how he's led LSU to the promised land in what, only his third full season as a head coach?
Yes,
His third full season.
Third full season as head coach. Coach O has learned under a lot of recognizable names. He did get a job as assistant coach under Jimmy Johnson at Miami. He also was under Dennis Erickson, and obviously Pete Carroll at USC. Here's what Pete Carroll had to say about Coach O coming into the championship game. There's two things that stood out to me from what he was said, and this comes from The Advocate, our hometown newspaper. And one is, so thrilled for his success. Frickin' Coach of the Year, Heisman Trophy winner, chances to be a national champion and all that stuff. It's a great tribute to Eddie. And then he later said, when he left and went to Ole Miss, I never felt the same. I felt like we really lost something enormous in the program just because of his heart and soul and everything he brought. That was Pete Carroll. And Dennis Erickson had this to say about Coach O. You take things from all your mentors, but you're your own self. He's Ed. He's Coach O. And he's developed that himself.
And Coach O, what I like about him, he embodies the spirit of Louisiana. He was born and raised here in the state of Louisiana. He was born in, I think, LaRose, Louisiana. So when you have a guy coaching, LSU football, which is a staple here in Louisiana, when you have a guy that is Louisiana inside and out, everything else falls in place. And I'm talking about all aspects of the game, the coaching, the way your players play out there on the field. And Coach O is definitely a guy that these players are willing to run through the wall of China for. I mean, and here's some things about Coach Orgeron that sets him apart from the rest of the coaches in this nation. And this is from ESPN that posted this on Instagram. And it said that here's some facts about him. He learned how to play football while on crutches and in a cast. He used to line up for D-line drills against The Rock while wearing no pads. One time he fired his team up by ripping his shirt off and shotgunning 2 Red Bulls. He ordered 15 pounds of crawfish at a restaurant that doesn't even serve crawfish. And he had this saying, the day I can't whoop a man's ass, the day I don't get out of bed. So if you're looking to fight Coach O, that would be a horrible idea.
Yeah, it's like some interest. Obviously, he didn't have much success at Ole Miss, and I heard in an interview with him, he said one of the things that he did wrong at Ole Miss that he has since changed was that he coached at Ole Miss. He coached everybody like he coached Dwayne Johnson. And for those who didn't know, Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock, was a defensive end at Miami.
Defensive end.
Yeah.
He was
who was actually a promising player before he injured his knee.
And the guy that coached him was Coach Orgeron.
Yeah. And that was under Jimmy Johnson, I believe.
Yeah, I believe so.
So, yeah. The guy has quite a history. It is known that he originally signed as a player to play at LSU, but after just 2 weeks there, got homesick, went back home, and his dad was immediately said, okay, so you're going to be here. Here's a shovel. Start digging ditches. And the coach of I want to say it was the coach of Northwestern at the time, saw him digging ditches and rolled down the window and said, hey, you want to play for Northwestern? And Coach O was like, yes, sir. Just tell me where Northwestern is, and I'll be there. And then after graduating from Northwestern, O decided while playing there that he wanted to be a coach, not an NFL player. So he actually passed up on the opportunity to play pro football to pursue coaching, and did not get a offer right out of the gate.
He was a grad assistant after after his graduation.
Yeah, he was a grad assistant, and he initially went back home and was working shrimp boats. Then got a call from Arkansas, who asked if he wanted to be assistant coach there, and Coach O said in this interview that, he said, 1 second, and he went out, grabbed his shrimping nets, and tossed them in the water. Got back on the phone and said, "Yes, sir. Just tell me where Arkansas is, and I'll be there." So, and the rest is history, So, Joe Burrow and Coach O both have interesting histories and past to LSU that has brought us here to this point today, following up LSU's national championship win.
Coach O is definitely one of a kind, and I'm glad that he was hired on full time. And Coach O is going to be around for a long time. I mean, he's already on an extension. I think they extended Coach O, I believe, in the beginning of the season for like another, I want to say 4 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. So Coach O is going to be around for a long time, and we have definitely found our long-term coach for the next 10 plus years.
All right. We're kind of running out of time, so I'm just going to say we'll talk recruiting next week. But I think we're going to move on to the Saints now. We have a interview with, like I said, Bob Rose of the Canal Street Chronicles and Sports Illustrated. So we will get to that in our next segment. Okay, we have on the phone with us today Bob Rose of Canal Street Chronicles and Sports Illustrated. Come on and recap the Saints season with us. How you doing, Bob?
I'm real good, guys. Thanks so much for having me. Always hate to recount some painful memories, but the Saints did definitely have a terrific regular season, and I think their future looks bright moving forward.
I do too. It's just like frustrating that it came down to yet another playoff loss. It was the third straight year that they won the NFC South and third straight loss. However, at the same time, it's not exactly unprecedented because the Eagles did lose 4 straight playoff games in a row. 3 of those being the NFC title game. So, Saints kind of unfortunately joining the record books on that one.
Yeah, there's no question about it. All the kudos in the world to Sean Payton, Mickey Loomis, and that franchise's front office for putting together a team that has been near the top of the NFL heap of competitors, for the last 3 seasons. And the reality is that only one team can finish at the top of the heap every single year. And a Super Bowl title is just so tough to attain. Many franchises would kill to be in the Saints' position, of competitors year in and year out. And I think that that's where we are with this franchise and its structure right now.
I kind of feel like we're right there on the verge of a Super Bowl championship. It's just a few pieces still need to be addressed. So I guess let's talk a little bit of where the Saints are right now as a team. Obviously, they got a solid defensive line. I think that is the deepest position they have outside of maybe quarterback. Obviously, Jordan, Davenport really showed improvement this year. You got Amiyata, who, of course, is a free agent, but we'll get into that later. But I really liked what I saw from I think the rookies really performed well, especially Shy Tuttle, and I even like what little we saw from Carl Granderson.
Yeah, I do too. We'll start with Granderson. Once he put his legal troubles behind him, the short stretches that we did see on the field, I love his speed around the edge. He did a terrific job in pursuit, outside on running plays or screen passes. Go back and look at that film of the Carolina game in particular. He beat Christian McCaffrey to the edge on a few of those swing passes, and there's not many defensive linemen in the league that can do that. Shy Tuttle, I loved that free agent signing, when they inked him immediately, once the draft had ended, and I think that he has a big future going forward. Once the team re-signs Taylor Stallworth, who was a surprise preseason cut. I loved Taylor Stallworth last year, and I think that he's a big run stopper in the middle. And like you pointed out, the depth of that defensive line, which I think is the deepest in the entire National Football League, they were able to overcome injuries to Sheldon Rankins, who was never really fully recovered from that Achilles last year and ended up being shelved after 10 games anyway. Marcus Davenport was in and out of the lineup, and I know people are raising a lot of questions, and I suppose rightfully so, about his durability. But if he can put that behind him, he is so talented. He is as talented as any Pro Bowl lineman out there. Cam Jordan on the other side, he's a Hall of Famer. If he were to retire right now, and Cam, if you're listening, we're not asking you to do that. We'd like to see another decade or so of performance from you. Cam Jordan is one of the most underrated edge defenders in the league, and they really showcased their depth when Davenport was nicked up. Trey Hendrickson, Mario Edwards played both inside and outside. I think he had a really underrated season as well. And Malcolm Brown. You cannot say enough about the free agent acquisition of Malcolm Brown this offseason. He meant as much to the defensive line and that defense as a free agent signing as the Mario Davis did the year before. And Malcolm, he was known as a run stopper, but he pleasantly surprised me with his pass rushing ability too. They were able to pressure a lot of quarterbacks with that interior pressure, which leaves blitzing lanes open for the linebacking core and allows Cam Jordan to get more one-on-one blocking. And we know that there's not too many linemen that can handle Cam one-on-one. I'm really, really excited about this defensive line.
Okay. I had obviously you said that Jordan is a Hall of Famer, and I could not agree more with that. He is definitely. He just seems like Drew. He just seems to get better with age. He should catch Ricky Jackson pretty soon. But the question is, like, do you think that he can catch what was his name, Bruce Smith?
I think he has the potential. I do. Cam's coming off a career high 15.5 sacks. But I think that this was the 5th time in his 8-year career that he had double-digit sack totals. So certainly if he continues that production over the next 6 or 8 years, which I realize is a lot to ask, I do think that it's entirely possible. If Bruce Smith put his sack total up there, that it is. I'm not going to call it unreachable since we're talking about the subject right now, but it's going to be tough to catch. I think at the very least, by the time Cam does wrap up his career, he's probably going to be in the top 5 of all-time sack leaders at the very least. But yeah, I think he has a shot for Bruce Smith's sack record if he continues to play at a high level.
Hey, Bob, can you hear me?
Josh, yeah, can you hear Josh?
I heard him start to speak, and then he broke up a little.
Can you hear me now?
Better, yeah, Josh.
All right. I actually want to kind of stay on the defensive line. I want to go back to Carl Granderson. Do you believe that he could probably be sprung into a starting role very soon for the Saints?
Into a starting role? I don't know. Granderson still has, he plays a little bit undisciplined. And I think as long as Davenport is healthy, Davenport's your starter there. But it was obvious that the coaching staff, the defensive coaches, really liked what Granderson could bring because they didn't have any hesitation in plugging him into the lineup with increased snaps as injuries started to hit that edge spot. And I think that that's a testament to how Granderson's abilities as well. Because when we saw injuries in the linebacking core or the secondary as the season progressed, New Orleans had to kind of scour the waiver wire, and they had no such desire once Davenport was hurt, and I think Trey Hendrickson missed a couple games early in the season too. And so that at the very least, that Carl Granderson is a quality depth player, and I think that as he gets more disciplined against the run and can kind of seal off the edge and handle his assignments on a consistent basis, yeah, he does have starting potential.
Because I do believe that Carl Granderson could be that that legitimate dark horse in that Saints front seven, and that's why I asked him if he can be sprung into a starting role very soon. Considering if something were to happen, God forbid, to one of our top defensive linemen next season, so I do believe that he can be that low key X factor, that dark horse that the Saints can need on the defensive line.
Yeah, and that's tough to disagree with, like I said, because, even though Davenport does have a couple years left on his rookie contract, and I think Trey Hendrickson's contract, as well as Mario Edwards, is up after this coming season. So if Granderson does evolve, like you're kind of projecting, that allows the Saints it puts the Saints in a good financial position and not necessarily having to pay top dollar, to either bring in another edge rusher or retain what they have, because they already have such a talent, potential talent like Granderson, right there in the locker room.
All right, so I know that we've been on the defensive line for quite a while, and we can go on all day about their talent. But now that the season is over, let's go into the offseason, like free agency, the NFL draft. What position do you believe the Saints should target in the NFL draft? Because there's a lot of young talent coming out of college.
Wow, and I'm actually just finishing up an article that's going to be published on SI.com either this afternoon or tomorrow morning, highlighting a lot of that. I think at the very top of the team needs list has to be wide receiver, and I realize a lot of people are feeling that way. But that position was exposed badly down the stretch. You already have the league's best wide receiver, maybe an all-time great, and Michael Thomas. So I'm not necessarily advocating that you go out and get a number one receiver, either through free agency or the draft, but they need a secondary threat there. Jared Cook evolved into a deadly complement as a pass receiver from the tight end spot. Alvin Kamara is one of the best pass-catching backs in the NFL, but the fact that you did not have a legitimate threat at a number two wide receiver, either out of the slot or at the boundary, that allowed defenses to contain Thomas. Now, and we saw it from Minnesota. Mike had 7 catches and 70 yards, which is a solid performance, but he wasn't really able to break out because the Minnesota secondary had zero fear that Traquan Smith or Ted Ginn Jr. or any of those other wideouts were going to hurt them. So they rolled their coverage towards Thomas and knew that they were going to be able to get away with that. Ted Ginn Jr. is a free agent. I don't think he's going to be. I don't think that Ted Ginn Jr. is going to be retained or re-signed, rather. Traquan Smith continues to be a disappointment, especially in traffic. So I think that the Saints really need to go out. I think they need to go out to get a couple guys. I would like to see them add a second-tier veteran slot guy who could pick up those key third downs and can work the intermediate zone as well. And I'd like to see them pick up a solid number 2 inside-outside guy through the draft. But even beyond the wide receiver spot, I think that secondary is going to end up being a big team need because I have a feeling that free agency is going to hit both the safety position and cornerback position hard. And I'm very, very interested to see what the Saints end up doing in offensive guard, where Andrus Peat is a free agent. Nick Easton and Larry Warford are both carrying big, big cap numbers into next year. And I think that both of them could be asked to either restructure or we could see the team make some moves there. I don't think that the Saints are going to completely revamp both guard spots, but I would like to see them draft one, if not with their first-round pick. And there's a couple guys that will be available in the first round around where the Saints are picking. I would not be upset at all to see New Orleans bypass a wide receiver for a solid interior lineman. We saw what that could do to the entire offense when they added Eric McCoy at center last year. So it wouldn't surprise me if they did the same thing and looked at wide receiver later on. Because, like you said, there's a lot. This class is considered deep at the wideout spot. So you could either move up into the second round to grab a wideout, or even stay put it with your third round pick and grab a capable wideout there. Remember, Michael Thomas was a second round pick, so you don't need to grab one high in the first round to be a productive offensive performer immediately at that spot. But I do think that they'll address the guard spot and the draft rather than free agency. And I think we all need to be on pins and needles to see what happens in that secondary as the Saints move into free agency.
Man, and I think a good like a number 2 receiver or a good receiver in the slot. And this is a receiver that I just found out is going into the draft. Henry Ruggs out of Alabama. If he is available by the second round, I mean, I think he would be a good pickup for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And you need that kind of versatile guy, to not only be a capable slot receiver, but also be a threat at the number 2 wideout spot. Somebody that could develop into a number 1 caliber. Again, we're not looking to supplant Michael Thomas here, especially after that long-term contract he signed last year. But we've also seen offenses throughout the league, how successful they've been when they've had 2 number 1 guys on the outside. And when you have Jared Cook running those patterns down the seam at tight end and Alvin Kamara coming out of the backfield, there's not too many pass defenses that are going to be able to keep up with that.
And I got one more question. I'm going to hand you back over to John. And this is actually an 800-pound gorilla in the room. As we all know, Drew Brees is a good 40 years old. And there's no guarantee that Teddy Bridgewater is going to be coming back next season because we've all seen his potential. He led the Saints to 5-0 when Brees was hurt. Bridgewater knows what he's capable of. He did take a pay cut to stay with the Saints, have a year behind Drew Brees, and he did pass up an opportunity to be in a starting role somewhere. But my guess is he's not going to pass that up this time. And with Brees, he's a free agent. He's getting a little older. I'm pretty sure that he's probably going to be coming back next year. But when do you think the Saints should look at either maybe getting another free agent QB or getting a QB through the draft?
And that's $1 million question, if you pardon the pun. I agree with you. I think Drew Brees will be a New Orleans Saint next year. I have said for years now that I didn't think he was going anywhere until at least after the 2020 season, which does give us one more year. There's some financial issues too as far as Brees is concerned. If Drew, on the slimmest of slim chances, that Drew ends up signing with someone else as a quarterback next year, the Saints are still on the hook for I think up to $20 million. A Brees salary that's going to take a hit on their salary cap. The same thing goes if Drew retires. I also think that that's a very extremely slim possibility that Drew will decide to step away after this year. He's still playing near the top of his game, certainly at an extremely high level. So while I expect Brees to be a New Orleans Saint next year, I also believe that and agree with you that I think Teddy Bridgewater will get a starting opportunity somewhere else. I don't expect Bridgewater to be signed immediately in free agency, though. I think he's going to kind of test the waters. He and his agent would be smart to talk to other teams, other potential suitors, and kind of feel out where they are as far as, hey, are you going to draft a quarterback if you sign me? Because Bridgewater is only 27 years old. Like you said, he played very well in his 5 starts with Brees. He's no Drew Brees, but very few are. But Bridgewater has shown himself that he can be a capable long-term starter, given the right system. The only way I see Teddy Bridgewater coming back to New Orleans is if he, Drew, Sean, and the front office kind of sit down and Drew says, and I doubt they would ever make this public, but Drew says to Teddy and Sean, okay, I think that 2020 is going to be my last year. Then you'll see a similar contract structure offered to Teddy Bridgewater that he had this year. And hey, Teddy, can you sit behind Drew one more year? We may need you, but we're still looking at you as a long-term starter. I don't think that that's a big scenario possibility, but I do think it exists. So a long-term answer to your question would be, I've never thought that Sean Payton was worried about a successor to Drew Brees until after Drew steps away. We have seen rookie quarterbacks step in and have immediate success in today's NFL, and the rule structure allows for that. I believe Sean Payton thinks his offensive system can be very quarterback friendly. And if he curtails some of the complex language and simplifies the playbook, I do think that a rookie quarterback could come in and have immediate success. Given the other team needs that the three of us have outlined so far, I don't see the Saints grabbing a rookie quarterback in this year's first round. Not with the picks that they have available. It wouldn't surprise me if Mickey Loomis swung some deals to pick up an extra first-round pick and then potentially grab one. We've seen crazier scenarios out of the New Orleans Saints, but I don't see that happening necessarily this year. This team is focused on winning right now and adding another Super Bowl ring right now while they have Drew Brees. And I honestly believe that they're not worried about the quarterback position until Drew says, okay, now I'm done.
Because, I mean, there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks coming out, especially next year. I mean, you got guys like Trevor Lawrence that's going to be stepping out. I mean, so, we just got to see where it goes. But, I mean, Mickey Loomis has done an amazing job as far as in the offseason, the free agency, and the draft. So I'm definitely excited about the rookie class that's going to be coming into New Orleans next season.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and again, and it seems like the NFL system and the NFL culture has made it a lot easier for a rookie to come in and have immediate success. So with the amount of quarterbacks, and I know that there's going to be a handful go in the first round this year. I think that we're going to see that year in and year out from here on out. But there's also some early talented prospects that could be available in the 2021 draft. And if we'll say that Drew decides to step aside after 2020, after we all get over our heartbreak and everything like that, it is at that point that I think Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis would move heaven and earth to grab a rookie quarterback in the first round, regardless of the trades that they would potentially have to make. And then at that point, they would then look to sign a veteran quarterback as sort of a stopgap, either a short-term starter or a backup, an experienced backup to add to your rookie signal caller, just in case he falters or struggles out of the gate. But I don't think that the Saints brass are worried about that at this exact moment.
Well, as long as we don't grab Ryan Fitzpatrick, we should be okay.
Right.
Okay, I want to talk the secondary a little bit. They do have a number of free agents coming up, and that does still seem to be the weakest link in the defense, the inconsistency more than the talent. The talent definitely seems to be there. But they got some decisions to make. Obviously, Von Bell is the biggest name that jumps out to me other than Drew Brees as far as being a free agent. But I don't consider Brees a threat to leave. Von Bell's a different question. I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints drop the tag on him just to make sure that they have first shot at re-signing him. But, the big questions to me would be, do they re-sign Apple? I do feel like Janoris Jenkins has solidified himself as that number 2 cornerback and has pushed Apple out of New Orleans.
This wouldn't be the first time he pushed Apple out of a team.
And the other question is P.J. Williams. In the right role, he seems to do pretty well. But when he gets on the outside or against a number 1 receiver, it's like just gets burned a lot. What do you think?
And you put it politely. I know you guys follow my work, so I've had some choice words to say about the play of P.J. Williams. But if we're going to remain professional for a minute, I agree with you. I think if PJ is used in the right role, that he could be an effective defender, but that right role is not in man-to-man coverage, be it the slot or the outside. If he plays off the ball as a slot corner, we have seen PJ make some plays. And we saw him be extremely effective when they started him at the free safety spot when both Von Bell and Marcus Williams had to miss some time with injury. That's where I think PJ's natural fit has always been. But at this point, you're right. He is a free agent. I think it's 50-50 if the Saints even are able to retain him or bring him back. I think that they're going to let PJ test the market, see how the market plays out, and they'll probably offer him some sort of contract, but it's not going to be at a high rate. Eli Apple. If you ask me at midseason, and I think I did publish an article about this, I thought that the Saints should make a big attempt to re-sign Eli Apple once he hits free agency, but Apple slumped badly down the stretch. And Josh, you brought up a great point when you said that Janoris Jenkins has probably supplanted him as the number 2 cornerback spot. Jenkins played 3 games as a Saint when they picked him up off of waivers, and I love the signing when it happened. And as long as Janoris keeps his head on straight, he's one of the most talented cornerbacks in the league. He is a playmaker on that back end. He can turn defense into instant offense, and he had a spectacular outing against Stephon Diggs in that wild card playoff round. Having said that, if the Saints pick up the option on Jenkins' contract, and they do have first right to do so, he is going to cost them over $11 million against the cap. Janoris has said that he doesn't want to remain in New Orleans. He loves the team, loves the city, loves the region. And I would love to see him. He's a perfect complement to Marshawn Lattimore. And there's not too many teams that can boast a better 1-2 tandem at cornerback in the league than the Saints can if they have a Marshawn Lattimore and a Janoris Jenkins to roll out there. So I think if the decision was, okay, would we rather have pay Janoris Jenkins or Eli Apple, I think that decision is going to be to Jenkins. But it wouldn't surprise me if they tried to negotiate some sort of longer-term deal to reduce the salary cap hit for this season with Jenkins. I don't think they'll let him hit the free agent market because of so many other questions throughout the secondary, but that's certainly a possibility. Patrick Robinson at cornerback has been a colossal disappointment. Carries one of the higher salaries on the team. I think he's 7th or 8th highest salary on the entire team. And given his lackluster performance, I think he is certainly going to be a cap casualty. And Von Bell, I hadn't thought about the franchise tag, but I do suppose that it's possible for Von Bell. If the Saints franchise tag any of their free agents, it is going to be Von, who I think could potentially command a high salary on the open market. And Von has been an underrated defender and one of the most consistent defenders for the Saints defense over his 4-year career. He's consistently among the team leaders in tackles, led the league in fumble recoveries, and has been he's gotten better in a slot coverage role in each of his seasons so far. I think the Saints drafted Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who I thought had an outstanding rookie season, and Saquon Hamilton back-to-back in last year's draft class, with the possibility, knowing the possibility that they might lose Vaughn in free agency. And they are high on Hampton. But I think that as this season progressed, we saw Gardner-Johnson used more in a slot coverage role, almost a hybrid cornerback, where I think his skill set fits best. He can play safety and has that skill set, but I think he's better suited for Dennis Allen's secondary and that hybrid role as a third cornerback, third safety, definitely a nickelback kind of role. So if the Saints choose to franchise Von Bell, I don't think anybody should be upset about that. If they don't, I think that there's a good chance that they're going to lose him, and then the depth at the safety spot is going to be tested.
Absolutely. To me, I think Von Bell is the key player of free agency. I know people want to keep David Onyemata, but at the same time, as we talked earlier, I think the line is deep enough to where it can absorb the impact of him leaving.
Agreed.
Let's see who else. Other than that, I would say, I don't know, like A.J. Klein, I think would be worth bringing back on a team-friendly deal, but outside of that, I don't see many on the defensive side that really stand out to me. other than what we talked about, is people to work about retaining.
Do you think Saints gonna keep Kiko Alonso? I think he'll be a decent guy to bring back. I mean, I did see some good progression out of him until he had gotten hurt. But do you think that Kiko would be worth bringing back?
I do think that Kiko would be worth bringing back. And he is still under contract for 2020, but I think he carries an almost $7 million cap hit. He tore his ACL for the third time. I don't know whether it was on the same knee, but it's his third ACL injury of his career. So that's something to be concerned about, not only long term, but is Alonso going to be ready to start the season? Kiko is definitely a candidate, for a restructuring or even a renegotiating of a deal that'll make him a Saint for a few more years. Again, with the just like we talked about with Janoris Jenkins, that kind of contract would reduce the cap hit against the team for the 2020 season. And also allow them to offer A.J. Klein a contract. And I would like to see A.J. back as a Saint. While the New Orleans linebackers did play pretty well in 2019, led by that the monstrous season had by Demario Davis, we did see how thin that linebacking unit was when both Alonso and A.J. were out with injury. Craig Robertson is still capable of being a spot starter, but I don't think you want him in as a long-term solution. And people forget Alex Anzalone missed the season with another injury, but when he's healthy, he is extremely talented, and he'll be back and hopefully remain 100% healthy for the Saints next year, which does give the team some options at the linebacker spot. But I would definitely prefer them to see them restructure Alonso's deal rather than cut him or pay him the high contract for 2020. So that way they could move to hopefully either retain A.J. Klein or bring in another linebacker with A.J.'s type of skill set. Klein and Alonso too, for that matter. They're both athletically limited in coverage, but they are smart. They know their limitations. They've both shown a good feel for pass coverage during their zone drops, and both are extremely talented against the run as well as effective blitzers. So if they could somehow juggle the numbers to bring Klein back, or like I said, a linebacker similar to his skill set, have Anzalone back in tow, and then when they get Alonso back on the field healthy to go along with Demario Davis, there's only been one other linebacking core in Saints history that could rival that talent, and I don't think I need to mention their names, gentlemen.
I know. So I want to shift a little bit to the offensive side. Okay, so all three quarterbacks are free agents. Like we all said, Drews is more than likely going to be the starter next year. Teddy is likely gone, but the other one out there is Taysom Hill, and he's a restricted free agent, so the Saints have the leverage there. And Hill just continues to amaze me. He definitely was an improvement. He continues to prove in my mind. But the question to me is, like, why doesn't Sean Payton let him pass more? Because I do think he has that natural ability to pass, and I think if you continue to work with him, he could be an efficient passer in this league.
Yeah, I do. Taysom has tremendous arm strength. His vision as a quarterback looks like that it improved. We saw that during the preseason of 2019. He looked like a completely different quarterback than what we saw in 2018. And Sean Payton continues to tell everybody who listens during interviews that, yes, Taysom Hill has the capability and the skill to be a starter in this league. I personally... if the Saints were to enter the field with Taysom Hill as the starting quarterback, you would see a completely different offense than what we see out of this team right now. Some people have compared it to what the Baltimore Ravens run with Lamar Jackson. I don't know if we would see it that heavily geared towards the run, but it certainly wouldn't be as if the efficiency behind the passing offense that we've seen for so many years behind Drew Brees. I think at this point in his career, though, Taysom Hill has shown himself to be such a valuable, versatile weapon for the Saints offense. And you said that Taysom continues to amaze you. He does me too. And that's only because that's more than just his improvement as a quarterback. I was amazed at his improvement as a pass receiver this year. We knew what he could do as a runner and as a dual threat kind of guy. But Taysom was more effective against opposing defenses as a receiver, and most importantly, he earned the trust of both Teddy Bridgewater and especially Drew Brees in big situations. Drew did not hesitate to look to include Taysom in his second and third reads in big situations down the stretch, and I think that that's a testament to how Taysom Hill has an eye and his work ethic towards the game. Like I said, I think at this point in Taysom's career, I agree with you. I don't think he's going anywhere. The Saints have the leverage. They'll probably offer him a second-round tendered contract, and which does put other teams kind of behind the eight ball. They would have to basically offer Taysom Hill quarterback type of money to pry him away from the Saints. But I think as a future as a quarterback, to me, Taysom Hill's future as a quarterback in the league is still in doubt. I think his most effective approach is the way Sean Payton uses him as kind of a jack of all trades. And defenses have to game plan for that, and they don't. Taysom's more effective in the Saints offense as that jack of all trades guy rather than a quarterback.
Yeah, and speaking a little bit more on receivers, yeah, obviously they need a number two opposite of Michael Thomas. I'm a bit disappointed that Traquan Smith has not been able to develop into that number two. I actually did have a little bit of hope in that. He's shown the ability to catch the ball in preseason and in training camp, but outside of that, just when the season starts, just kind of disappears. Other than for a game or two each season, but is there anybody in free agency you think the Saints can target? Me personally, I would love to see, even just for 1 year, a Fitzgerald Brees connection. I think that'd just be amazing.
Larry Fitzgerald in a Saints uniform, and my former editor at Canal Street Chronicles, and currently the beat writer, the Saints beat writer for with us at SI.com, John Hendricks. He has been pounding on the table for the past 2 years at the trade deadline, and last year during free agency for the Saints to bring in Fitzgerald. And I definitely think that he fits well in the Saints offense, and I think that I would also love to see it. But Fitzgerald, one thing about Fitzgerald is his loyalty. And the Cardinals franchise did show some nice potential for market improvement in 2020. So I kind of expect Fitzgerald to be back in Arizona. I would be surprised if he's not, I'll put it that way. There is a guy that was available at the trade deadline that I wanted the Saints to make a move for, but the 49ers ended up getting him, was Emmanuel Sanders. And we saw Emmanuel Sanders in a 49er uniform absolutely torch the Saints secondary in early December. Sanders is going to be a free agent. And that he's 33 years old, so that kind of deal would be a short-term contract, probably 2 years at the most, with probably most likely an opt-out after 1 year. There's another guy, though, Randall Cobb from the Dallas Cowboys. Cobb had kind of an inconsistent year with Dallas this year, but he's only 30 years old. So he still has at least a few years of good football left. And we saw what Randall Cobb could do as a receiver for the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers. Cobb is effective both in the slot and on the outside, and I think would be content, just like Sanders or Fitzgerald would be, to come in and be the Saints' number two guy. And that's the key. If the Saints are going to bring in free agent wide receivers, those guys have to be acceptance of the fact that I'm going to be the number 2 receiver and maybe as many as far down as the 3rd or 4th option consistently in the passing game because of Michael Thomas, because of Jared Cook. But a smart guy, a guy like Sanders or Cobb that has been a productive veteran, or Fitzgerald, they would also realize, hey, when Drew Brees is the quarterback, Drew consistently, when he has the depth in his receiving core, a 3rd, 4th, even 5th option, receiver, be it running back or tight end or a wide receiver, they're still going to get some opportunities in this passing game. Not to mention the fact that the Saints are still a legitimate championship contender, and that has to be very attractive to a potential free agent, even a veteran such as Cobb or Sanders or Fitzgerald, especially Fitzgerald, who has been to 1 Super Bowl but hasn't gotten a ring. I think that's the type of guy that you could see the Saints bring in as a free agent, while they would still be able to target one in the draft to develop. And other than that, I don't see a lot of guys available. Other than those 3 names, there's a couple other names that I wouldn't mind seeing, but it would be a roll of the dice, such as a Brashard Perryman from Tampa Bay or a Nelson Aguilar from Philadelphia. Both those guys have good athletic ability and has flashed potential throughout their career. But similar to what you said about Traquan Smith, Traquan has teased us with the ability to be a deep receiver or a productive receiver in this Saints system, but he hasn't been able to put it together consistently. He has continued to disappoint as a receiver, particularly in traffic and being able to bring the ball in or get any kind of separation. So if you bring in a guy like Perryman or Aguilar, those 2 guys are very similar to Traquan Smith, in my opinion. So if they're going to bring in a free agent wide receiver, I personally want it to be a guy with a proven track record, such as an Emmanuel Sanders or a Larry Fitzgerald or even a Randall Cobb, a guy that's content with being the number 2 wideout behind Michael Thomas, knowing that he's going to get the opportunity, and being a willing mentor to a potential young receiver that hopefully they also add in the draft.
Speaking of the draft again, what do you think of the insanity of some of these fans out there who just want New Orleans to give up anything and everything to draft Joe Burrow?
But first and foremost, and the way you're talking, I think you guys, it sounds like you guys agree. It's not going to happen, Saints fans.
Oh, definitely not.
Not moving that 24 spots.
Secondly, Joe Burrow is a terrific story, had a terrific season, and I think will be a terrific NFL quarterback. But any Saints fan that truly wants this to happen, you're also, whether you realize it or not, you're also saying, I want my team to kind of scrap what they have going on and completely go into rebuilding mode. You don't do that when you've had back-to-back 13-3 seasons, 3 straight division titles, and continue to be legitimate Super Bowl contenders with a young, talented, and deep roster. You just don't. If you told me that the Saints were going to do this coming off of back-to-back 7 and 9 seasons a few years ago, yeah, okay. Maybe you do tear it down and start all over. Around a young quarterback that you move heaven and earth to get. You don't do it with this sort of roster, though. You tweak, retool, identify consistent team need or pressing team needs, and focus on that. Because, like you said, they've been knocking on the door for 3 years. This thing does not need a complete rebuild, and anybody who believes that it does, is frankly being a little bit foolish. That's why Joe Burrow isn't going to happen. Nice story. Congratulations to one of the best collegiate seasons we've ever seen, from an NCAA quarterback. And he is deserving of every award he's already received. And I think that he will do well in the pros, but it won't be as a New Orleans Saint.
There are some Saints fans out there that, well, a bunch of Saints fans that are also Tiger fans, and we like to see, our players go to the Saints. Do you see the Saints possibly targeting someone in the second or third round, like a Jordan Jefferson or a Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
I certainly wouldn't discount the possibility. I mean, during the Sean Payton era, we've only seen him draft 2 LSU players. One of them currently on the roster, and Will Clapp, and he's bypassed numerous LSU players that have gone in the first round where the Saints have had opportunities for them. I don't think that Sean or Mickey Loomis has a bias against LSU by any stretch. I just think, if you look throughout the NFL, for whatever reason, most franchises don't necessarily focus on, no matter how talented they are, don't necessarily focus on the kids from their regional universities. I've always found that to be a little bit funny. Can I see the Saints picking somebody like Jefferson if he's available, or adding running back depth? With the LSU back, yeah, I can, but I wouldn't I wouldn't lay a large sum of money on it just based off of their draft track record.
Oh. Sorry, I was kind of like just soaking everything in about Saints possibly drafting somebody from LSU, but. I mean, I do believe that the Saints should probably maybe take a shot at Justin Jefferson. I mean, he can add depth to the receiving core, and he could be somebody that the Saints can develop into, somebody who could be a number 1 eventually.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Jefferson checks off all the boxes as to everything that we just talked about. As far as wanting in the next wide receiver to complement Michael Thomas. I think that he would do really well in this Peyton offense. And if you removed the letters LSU from the side of his helmet and just made it a generic collegiate jersey, there would be a lot of mock drafts that would probably mock Jefferson to the Saints even as high as their late first round pick, or moving up in the second round to get him. I hope that if the opportunity is there to draft Jefferson, I would love to see it. Like you pointed out, he checks off all the boxes that we would want in a wideout. With plenty of potential ahead. I mean, his upside is huge. I just, like you said, being the fact that he's from LSU, I personally wouldn't bet a large sum of money on it. But I really don't think that Sean Payton or Mickey Loomis are sitting there in the Saints warm room on draft day saying, we're not going to draft him because he's from LSU.
Right. Kind of moving towards wrapping all this up and bringing all the points together. So as we've all said, New Orleans, back-to-back 13-3 seasons, 3 straight NFC South titles, 3 straight playoff exits.
Coming in on the last play of the game.
Yeah, basically last play of the game. So, what do you think is the deal here, and what do you think the Saints can do to kind of get away from that? Because if they just showed up on both sides of the ball from the get-go, I said online after someone asked a question, it was like, if a team shows up on both sides of the ball from the start, the referees can't beat a team. But the Saints didn't, and the refs did.
Particularly last year against the Rams. This year against the Vikings, let's address this elephant in the room. Kyle Rudolph should have been flagged for pass interference on that game-winning touchdown.
Just about to ask you that.
But I just think for the most part, especially through the first 3 quarters of the game, the Minnesota Vikings just outplayed the New Orleans Saints on both sides of the football. The Saints, like warriors, really fought back through that fourth quarter. and had their opportunities to win the game in regulation and just didn't get it done. But that right there, that fourth quarter against Minnesota was the microcosm of the last 3 playoff years. And refs aside, heartbreak, fluky last play miracles aside, simply stated, the Saints did not take advantage of their own opportunities through any of those 3 games. The Minneapolis Miracle. God, I hate using that phrase. Never make me use it again. But the divisional playoff loss in Minnesota a few years ago. New Orleans got off to a horrible start, which is the last thing you want to do when you're on the road in the playoffs. Again, to the Saints' credit that year, they fought back. They dominated the second half, and a simple secondary breakdown in their secondary led to that heartbreaking defeat. Last year against the Rams, they had numerous opportunities to go up, I think 20 points or at least by 3 scores against Los Angeles, and didn't get the job done in the red zone. And then made some, turn the ball over a few times in the second half to keep Los Angeles into the game. Same thing this year. The Saints, who we have talked about all year as being a dominant presence on both the offensive and defensive lines, they were manhandled at the point of attack on both sides of the ball. Drew did not play a good game at all for 3 quarters, and although he played like Drew Brees is capable of playing in the fourth quarter, he still had that key fumble, to turn the ball over in prime scoring opportunity. It is those kind of things, the little miscues. It's the players that have to get cleaned up. And that comes from each individual player in that locker room. It comes from leaders such as Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Mike Thomas, Drew Brees. They know what it takes to get there. I think that they have proven that time and time and time again. But that toughest step is the last step before you get to the mountaintop. And if you talk to any coach or any player of just about any sport and any level, that's what they will tell you. This team has shown us their perseverance. They have shown us that they are warriors. They need to get the little things cleaned up in crucial moments like that. I still have confidence in them. This is why the 3 of us are sitting here talking about the Saints the way that we are. None of us are suggesting that they tear down this whole thing and start all over because they aren't good enough to win the big game. No, nobody is suggesting that at all. But they need to be a little bit more disciplined in key moments. I think that that's what it comes down to.
I do have a question. You know how we see the Saints, they perform very strong throughout the regular season. I mean, we've seen back-to-back 13-3 seasons, and just all of a sudden in the playoffs, they just flatline. Like, what do you believe on the field can be the cause of the Saints just making a full negative 360 and go from really good to very sluggish?
I wish I had an answer to that. I do. We know that these guys are fierce competitors. They need to check themselves. In big situations, they need to get out of their own head and basically stick to basics. You need to remember when you're in that situation. You need to remember the things that you did to get you there, and the more you come up short in big situations, especially when you only have yourself to look in the mirror and point the finger at, the more it gets inside your own head whenever you are again faced with that same kind of situation. And that's what has us so frustrated about these Saints is that we have seen it. We have seen poor tackling or poor coverage decisions, in big moments. Not just the playoffs, but you go back to that San Francisco game in early December, a game where, by the way, if they would have won, they would have been the number 1 seed. The secondary and poor angles, poor tackling, and poor pass coverage reads led directly to that defeat. it is that kind of thing, and that's what comes down onto the coaching staff, in my opinion. In addition to that, I felt pretty confident in what their game plans have been. The coaches' game plans have been each of the last 3 playoff exits. But the coaches need to do a better job of getting into the heads of their leaders, keeping the focus and keeping their emotions at a minimum. And again, just sticking to the basics and what do we do, guys, to get us in this position? We need to keep it simple. We need to simplify it. Ignore what happened in the past, because you're better than that. You have shown that you're better than that since you've gone 37-11 over the last 3 regular seasons. We just now need to take that next step, and we need to be focused on that next step rather than what has already happened.
Well, I just think it's a mental battle. I think the Saints can, the only way for the Saints to conquer it is to basically just go all the way, win the Super Bowl. I mean, I'm not on the field with him. None of us are on the field with him. So, I mean, there's no telling what goes through the Saints' mind whenever playoff hits.
What goes through the players' minds or the fans' minds?
The players' minds. I mean, while they're on the field, I mean, the way they play during the regular season and then just the way they play during the playoffs. I mean, we're not on the field with them, so, I mean, there's no telling, what goes through their mental process.
Yeah, and the mental part of the game, like you said, the mental part of the game is often what wins or loses you, a contest when it's two closely matched teams like this. And that's the hurdle that all of these Saints players that have experienced this over the last 3 years, that's the hurdle that they're going to be challenged to overcome. And you do have to wonder, do they have the mental and emotional wherewithal to overcome this for a 3rd straight year? In each of the last few years, the main question asked about the New Orleans Saints as they entered a new season was, are they going to have an emotional letdown after the way the previous season ended? The obvious answer to that question the last 3 years has been no, but how much more can they truly take? Physically, all these guys are still in their prime, and as we pointed out, they are fierce competitors, but at this point, as a fan, we're asking them, you need to now prove it to us that you can take that next step. Not only can, but will. And as a competitor myself, and anybody in that sort of situation, the mental hurdle is by far the toughest to overcome. And that's where it comes down on your leaders, your coaches, your Cam Jordans and your Demario Davises and your Drew Breeses. They're going to have to be the ones to do it. And if they are, and I certainly believe that they're all capable of doing it, but they now have to prove it to us, and they have to prove it to themselves. And they know that they don't have to prove anything to us, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that have to look at themselves in the mirror and look at the teammates beside them in that locker room and really, truly have to answer the question, did I do everything I could to help my team win a championship? So far, guys, the obvious answer is no, because they haven't gotten there despite their talent and despite their regular season successes.
And honestly, as fans, I mean, asking our team to win a Super Bowl, I'm gonna be honest, it's not much to ask. I mean, you look at a lot of teams, it's tough for them to win a Super Bowl if you look at a lot of teams, but considering how good we are and our potential, I mean, winning a Super Bowl is really not much to ask. I mean, as fans, from a fan standpoint, because we know what the Saints are capable of and we know how good they are in all phases of the game.
Yeah, precisely. And we have seen them, play at a championship level for all of the last 3 seasons. We have seen flashes of that championship level performance in the 4th quarter against Minnesota this year, in the first half against Los Angeles last year, in the second half against Minnesota the year before that. We need to see them string it together for 60 minutes in the games that matter the most.
Well, unfortunately, we're coming up on an hour, so uh, I guess just kind of wrap it up with the final question. It's kind of what's your overall and final thoughts on the season and the Saints going forward?
Uh, as far as the way I feel at the end of the season as a fan, I won't lie. I feel like I'm more disappointed in the team this year than I was in either of the last 2 years. Um, the 2017 season ended on a fluky miracle at the end. The 2018 season ended on a blatant referees no call. To wind up that one, despite missed opportunities like we highlighted before. Those endings made me angry for different reasons. This one makes me angry because I know that we're facing the end of an era in New Orleans. Even though Drew Brees, I expect, will play this season, the end is far closer than the beginning. We've seen it through most franchises in the NFL, and certainly with the New Orleans Saints franchise. Hall of Fame level quarterbacks, they don't grow on trees. I don't want to ask myself at the end, when Drew finally decides to retire, I don't want to continually look back when I do articles, past historical articles on this team saying this team only had one Super Bowl, which was an amazing achievement, but should have and could have and would have had all these other ones. As far as how I feel about them moving forward, I am going to be on pins and needles to see how some of these off-season decisions pan out. I'm not, many Saints fans are worried about the lack of space under the current salary cap. Don't. If you're truly worried about that, then you haven't followed Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton, because I have the utmost confidence that that this front office structure will do whatever they have to do financially to bring in the players that they want to bring in. I will be sad if a Von Bell leaves or some of their other talented players, because they have left their heart and soul on the field for this New Orleans Saints franchise. But I truly believe that this team is still a championship caliber unit and will be among the top Super Bowl contenders and top Super Bowl favorites in 2020. Interested to see how some of these off-season decisions pan out.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Bob, you want to tell people where they can find you?
Well, first of all, thank you both again for having me on. It's been too long, and I know we've taken some breaks on my show, the Bayou Blitz, but I definitely want to get both of you on sometime, at least once this off season, to get caught up, with each other and catch up on some moves that we're going to see our Saints making through free agency and the draft. Folks, as far as following me, I can be found on Facebook, Bob Rose, or Twitter at BobbyR2613. My articles I write for both the Canal Street Chronicles and for SI.com. If you want to seek me out either of those two places, Canal Street Chronicles can be found on Facebook or Twitter at Saints CSC. And the SI.com coverage can be found through either SI.com or the Saints News Network on Twitter. Give us a holler. We have a number of terrific writers on both publications. We love to interact with the fans. So send us your comments, your criticisms, your questions. We're here for you, and we thank you for all the love and support that you've given us up to this point.
Okay, that is Bob Rose of Canal Street Chronicles and Sports Illustrated. We're going to go to break right now and then come back and wrap up our program and talk the NFL playoffs and just another bunch of nonsense. All right, welcome back to Cajun Connection, and we wrap up with our final segment. We just got done with our interview with Bob Rose. So, not a whole lot much more to say about the Saints other than finding a way to overcome the struggles they have had in come playoff time, and getting over that hump at least one more time with Drew Brees, which I do believe they have the ability to do.
I mean, they have all the potential in the world. They got all the talent. They have all the pieces. And I mean, like Bob said, I know how a lot of fans want Joe Burrow to stay in Louisiana, come to New Orleans. But I mean, when you already have a really good foundation and you already have a really good team, you don't just tear everything down and try and rebuild. This is the time for the Saints to polish everything, to add some more pieces to the empire they already have, and actually get over that hump and win the title.
Yeah. So, okay, I want to talk a little bit about the bowl season, and then finish up with what we have seen in the playoffs so far, which have been interesting to see, to say the least.
Very interesting.
So the SEC actually finished pretty strong in the bowls. If you include LSU's 2 playoff wins, 7-2. The only losses being Mississippi State and Auburn, which Auburn losing was a bit of a surprise.
It was a huge surprise. I mean, considering Auburn defensively, but I mean, Minnesota coming from a Big Ten, and the way college football is now, I mean, the top conference is the SEC, and then right below it is Big Ten.
Yeah. The first one on my list here is Tennessee 23, Indiana 22. Bit surprising to see how well Tennessee recovered after such a horrific start, losing at home to who beat them at home?
Georgia State and also BYU.
Yeah, losing to Georgia State and BYU at home.
And they were left for dead after that.
But Jeremy Pruitt certainly seems to have saved his job for at least one more year with a little bit of hope moving forward.
I believe Tennessee has a very bright future ahead of them.
Yeah. All right, Georgia defeated Baylor in the Sugar Bowl, the official Sugar Bowl, 26-14. Kind of what I expected for Georgia versus Baylor.
It was expected. I mean, Baylor, Coach Rule, their former head coach who just left to be the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, really turned that program around. Don't know how Baylor's going to do in the future, losing their head coach, but I do believe that this is a good start. So this was more of a progression game for them, a game to kind of gauge how ready they would be in order to really take the bright lights. Georgia, this was a must-win game for them. I mean, they were in the Sugar Bowl last season and they lost to Texas, who claims that they were back. But according to this season, not so much.
Here was one of the surprises was Minnesota coming out and beating Auburn, putting up 31 on them, and holding them to 24 is not the big surprise. It's being able to score 31 on a very stout defense.
That was really surprising. I mean, I really thought that Auburn was going to be able to, break the game out, considering, Bo Nix, their true freshman quarterback, on how he's built his confidence up throughout the season, how he has the experience under his belt. Defense being as prolific as they are, having a suffocating front seven. So I was definitely surprised when Minnesota was able to go out there and beat Auburn and take the Outback Bowl from
them. Alabama beating Michigan was not a big surprise. I think Coach Harbaugh has reached the pinnacle of what he can achieve at Michigan. I know people in Michigan wanted more, but Michigan their brand is bigger than their reputation.
See, Michigan's never going to get over that hump until they can beat Ohio State. Until they can beat Ohio State, Michigan, this is the pinnacle of where Michigan is going to be, like you said. But I do believe that their pinnacle is going to reach higher once they beat Ohio State. Until that happens, what you saw from Michigan this season is the highest that they will ever go.
Yeah. And funny thing about Alabama, they actually had Nick Saban as part of the an analysis crew last night.
That was funny, Just.
Did you see his face when Lee Carso pulled out the LSU Tiger thing, and he's just like right next to Nick
brings
Saban.
Back memories from earlier this season. You remember he pulled out that Tiger head in the beginning, earlier this year, and yeah. How does that feel?
Nick Saban trying to fake a smile. So I had to say I love what Carson did when he pulled out that jersey with his name spelled with the EAUX on it.
That was awesome.
That
Also, people, Nick Saban wearing that Affleck suit. That's a suit he wears for his Affleck commercials.
yeah.
So I bet half of y'all went ahead and go ahead and got your insurance with Affleck now, huh? Don't lie. Y'all know y'all did.
All right. Okay, so Florida came in and beat Virginia 36-28. That's not too big of a surprise for me.
Not a surprise. I mean, Virginia was going to get their shots, and considering having Bryce Perkins at quarterback, who has gotten better throughout his career at Virginia. But Florida, they're on the right track. Dan Mullen has definitely rebuilt those guys. And Florida, I do have as my front runner to win the SEC East next season.
Yeah. Now this one was a bit of a surprise. Texas A&M coming out and putting on a rather impressive defensive showing against what was one of the Big 12's better offenses in Oklahoma State, beating them 24-21.
That one surprised me as well. I mean, in considering how Oklahoma State thrived on the run with Chuba Hubbard, and come to find out, Chuba Hubbard is actually skipping the draft, and he's coming back for his senior season. So Chuba Hubbard is definitely one of my front runners to win the Heisman next season because he's right pretty much at Barry Sanders status as far as his career at Oklahoma State on the ground. Texas A&M kind of had a decline this season. I was surprised at how many steps they took back. But I do believe that Texas A&M will probably shake back next season. I mean, under Jimbo Fisher. You just got to give him time to really get things established. I mean, he still has some of Kevin Sumlin's players. So when we get more of Fisher's players in, we'll definitely see a lot of improvement.
Okay, Louisiana in the bowl season had a very strong showing, finishing again with when you include the two LSU victories, 5-0. UOL actually beat Miami, Ohio, 27-17.
But that Miami wasn't the only Miami to get beat. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Both Miami's lost because Louisiana Tech knocked off the Miami Hurricanes in the Independence Bowl in Shreveport, 14-0.
That was actually the first shutout in Independence Bowl history.
And out of all games, La Tech beating the Hurricanes, that's a huge victory for that program.
It's a huge victory for the program. I do like, what it kind of infers, but at the same time, the U's not back, okay? The U is not back.
Well, in the U's defense, the U has a very young team this year. And not only that, after firing Mark Richt, they're in a rebuilding mode. They did promote before the season, they did promote Manny Diaz, who was formerly their defensive coordinator, to head coach. So they are in a rebuilding mode, and they are very young. There's a lot of freshmen on that team, but I wasn't expecting them to get shut out completely against a team out of the Conference USA, 14-0. I mean, but
no, Louisiana Tech, they're whack.
I thought it was Conference USA.
No, that's Tulane.
No, Tulane's in the American Conference.
Oh yeah, they are.
But still, it just goes to show how good Coach Holtz, the job that he's done at La Tech. And I mean, La Tech is a team, if they keep playing the cards right, La Tech is definitely a group of 5 team to look out for.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, as much as like to get them credit for beating Miami, it's like I said at the beginning of the season, people want to come into the season declaring the U is back and then get a few games in and have to make a U-turn.
But still, when you're a program like Louisiana Tech, being a group of 5 team, I mean, this was a huge victory for their program, going against the U, who has a dominant reputation, coming out of the ACC, coming out of a Power 5 conference. I mean, it's huge. I mean, same as like Appalachian State going to Williams-Brice and beating the South Carolina Gamecocks. That's a huge victory. Or Western Kentucky going to Arkansas and obliterating the Razorbacks. That's a huge victory for teams like that.
And then lastly was Tulane, who rallied from being down 2 scores to beat uh,
Southern Miss.
Southern
And they put up
Miss.
30 unanswered points on the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. They were down 13-0 in the first quarter, and that offense rallied. And it just, I mean, you can't say enough about the job that Justin McMillan has done after transferring from LSU, and he has been the X factor in that Tulane offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Impressively so, UOL and Louisiana Tech finished with 11 and 10 wins respectively.
Tulane finished 7-6.
Yeah,
So I mean they kind of they started off like red hot. I think once they were like 5-1, and they were very sluggish towards the end of the season. But they ended on a very high note.
You have to sit there and ask, had either of UOL or either UOL or Louisiana Tech actually been able to finish undefeated, which they both came very close to doing. Perhaps one of them could actually have been a part of that group of 5.
I believe the team that could have been that group of 5 would have been Louisiana Tech for sure. ULL, they still have some holes in their game, but they have done a pretty good job. I mean, ULL is definitely a team that's on the rise, and they did. I want to say they extended their head coach for, I want to say, another 3 years. I want to say, I will have to go back and look at it, but UL Lafayette has definitely bought into what their head coach has brought to the program.
Yeah. So we are coming up on 12 minutes, and I will push the NFL playoffs to next week, especially after you said, next week is this coming weekend is, in fact, the conference championship games, which obviously will decide the 2 teams to play in the Super Bowl, which does not come without some conspiracy theories. I've heard that it's the NFL's 100th season, so how better to have that conclude with a rematch of Super Bowl I.
Well,
Packers Chiefs.
And it can happen, but it's going to be a tall task for the Packers. I mean, they tried going to Levi to play the Packers earlier in the season, and and the Niners, let's just say the Niners had their way with them. Just going to say that.
I know. All right, so that is this week's episode of Cajun Connection. Next week we will talk, like I said, LSU recruiting. We'll talk the NFL playoffs. And we're also going to start touching up a little bit on men's and women's basketball, as well as the upcoming baseball season. And, why not? Let's talk a little bit of the Pelicans. After all, they are doing at least somewhat better than they got off the start they got off to.
Somewhat. And why Zion Williamson should just sit out for the rest of the season and just have him start fresh.
Yeah, unless he blows out his shoe again. All right, thank you for tuning in. For those of y'all who actually got through the entire show, yeah, you.
Clap to you now.
I will be uploading our segments individually for those who want to watch the program in segments and not spend 2 hours listening to us talk. All right, see you next week.